Okay, we are connected to a cloud server. I think
Oh,
that means. I think that means. I think that means that. I think that means that like we're too close for missiles. Switching to guns. We're good to go here.
awesome.
Let me get my timer set up here so we don't blather on. All right, cool. We got people who are trickling in already. Ah, wonderful. It's good to see. Looks like we got Pukar from Security Pal is here. Delightful. Oh, there's Ryan Chisholm. Oh goodness, one of my account executives just joined, Peter Bureau, former. He's in onboarding right now.
Steve Conway, who's at Schedulo, where Brian Remington's at. Steven, sorry, I should make sure because I can't stand the name Steve.
Yeah, the
But
Steven.
he was actually in Second Ranger Battalion. Fun fact. Only other guy I know of from Second Ranger Bat besides one other who's transitioned into tech sales. So pretty awesome.
That is interesting. Actually, I had a really great call with I hope that like this doesn't engender you like talking shit on another branch of the military,
Do
but
it.
a former colonel from from the Marines this morning. Like you would you'd think there would be more former military, but I guess you were just. I mean, it's not a ton of Rangers, so like that's not surprising that there's
Mhm.
just you and Steven, but like is I guess I haven't seen as much as I would expect. Maybe maybe people maybe
They
just don't
all they all
see it.
end up at AWS, where they have like a very deliberate, concerted recruiting program, and the culture is a lot more aligned with what you're going to get in the military or
Interesting.
special operations. I think you
Yeah.
thrive in a place like Amazon where it's like an idea meritocracy that's
Mm.
very similar to Ranger Regiment when you're planning a mission. Um, on the flip side, there's great organizations like Breakline that are helping vets transition now. Elite Meat
Yeah.
for
Shift
SEAL.
shift is
Shift,
another one that
Shift is
I've
stellar.
heard of.
Bunker Labs. So it's crazy because none of that stuff existed when I got out, and probably would have made 11 less mistakes because of it. But neither
Yeah,
here.
I mean, yeah, it would have been. Well, I mean, it would have been like 160 versus 171 mistakes, right? So,
exactly. Exactly. Who am I kidding?
uh,
I made all the same mistakes.
okay, so it looks like I think it looks like kind of new attendees are trailing off here, so that's great. We'll get our party started here. So hey everyone, thanks for joining us at on Sales Strategy Office Hours. Pumped to have I think this is our fourth, I want to say. Um, so glad to have everybody here. We have a really great guest who's joining us today, Stephen Broudy. A little bit more about him in a second. But yeah, for the folks who haven't joined us before, I see that there's a bunch of people who have joined us previously, so I'm stoked on that. High retention is usually a good signifier of product market fit. Um, Sales Strategy Office Hours was inspired by the fact that I do a lot of one-on-one chats with people like, hey, Pete, I have this problem, et cetera, et cetera. So, end up kind of like tearing down someone's problem, like poking holes, trying to figure things out. And just had the observation that if you potentially you could do it in public, you could share a lot, you could help people who have the same problems out. Kind of, and then not dissimilar to folks, if you've ever listened to like Car Talk on NPR or like Loveline or whatever, it can be pretty helpful there. So that's essentially what we do. We have questions that people have submitted ahead of time. Also, if you have a question that you'd like to see tackled, go ahead and drop it in the chat. And so Stephen and I will do our damnedest to give you to give good insights there, or at least pretend that we are giving good insights there. We'll try to handle like 5 or 8 throughout the hour. So without any kind of further ado, I want to introduce our guest this week. This is Stephen Broudy. He's currently the head of sales at Bevy Labs, and I'll let him kind of dig into the rest.
Perfect. Well, high retention makes sense after you have a guy like Corey Bray prepare to see those numbers tank. I feel sorry for whoever follows me. It's going to be a lot less attended because of what I plan to say today. And if this is
Uh-oh.
car talk. I hope I'm click, not clack, because I think one of them is dead.
I know.
But I love the analogy, and I'm excited to dig in. just by way of background, I currently run sales at Bevy. Bevy underpins the community and field marketing programs for companies like Salesforce, Slack, Atlassian, Asana, Snowflake, Adobe, like you name it, we probably underpin it. And we're sort of the best kept secret in customer marketing right now. That said, I'm not here to pitch Bevy, but I came to Bevy by way of Salesforce, and I came to Salesforce by way of the MuleSoft acquisition. When we were acquired by Salesforce, I was running global business operations, focused at the time actually on talent effectiveness, and then immediately tasked with integrating the two companies and helping to drive sales effectiveness as a broad mandate across the org, which kind of at the time really mostly encompassed making sure Salesforce handed over leads in a way where we could quickly. So I'm not purporting to have massively moved the needle there either. Prior to that, I ran global inside sales and the SDR team as well not global, in the Americas. And instead of running global sales development and inside sales, I actually was tapped to stand up global biz ops, which was something I would never wish on anyone, but I also am extremely glad I've done, because it's really paid off in dividends. So anyhow, I'm done talking about myself.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm excited because you're definitely a triple threat insofar as you ran an SDR organization of substantial scale. You then moved into sales operations and had to get good at math. And then now you're in kind of like squirrely, early stage, scrappy sales land. And so having that kind of trio of skills is not super frequent, plus all the, add a bunch of Hawaiian shirts to it, and it's like very much like a rare unicorn, a rare purple squirrel.
Oh, and Hawaiian masks as well. So
that is a very handsome Hawaiian mask.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So just a little bit on me. My name's Pete Kazanji. I'm the founder of Atrium. We make sales performance analysis software. I also am the founder of Modern Sales. A lot of the folks here on the call are probably members of Modern Sales. It's the nation's largest sales operations leadership and enablement community. It's very much focused on peer learning and peer education, kind of helping people help each other out. Obviously, Stephen is very familiar with community. He is an MSP OG for sure. We are the white whale that opportunity for Bevy to eventually close. Once we move off of our Janktastic Google group. But if you're not a member of Modern Sales, it's absolutely fantastic. You should check it out at modernsaleshq.com. And so my background comes from, I used to be a product marketer, product manager at VMware back in the day. I started a software company called Talent Bin. That's where I really first started doing sales stuff, because I had to be our first AE, our first sales manager. I ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales after that. So that's what I kind of bring to the table here. Phenomenal. So I'm going through my Asana checklist here. Introduce the show, great, done. Introduce Stephen, done. Introduce me, good to go. So now we're going to get into stuff. I think the first question that we have here is from another Modern Sales OG, Brad Smith. I'm going to go ahead and promote him to a panelist right now. I've been doing this I think this is the fourth one, and I'm only just now figuring out Zoom's UI for promoting people to panel. And then one of these days, I'm just going to hit end, and everyone's going to be like, what the hell just happened? Oh, please, Brad, tell me. Oh, I thought you were wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Oh, I guess it counts.
It's Hawaiian enough.
Yeah,
it is.
Some flamingos in here.
That is absolutely fantastic. All right, Brad. So can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Just context on on what your company does very briefly, not a pitch, but just kind of like what is the sale, like who's the audience you guys sell to, what's the sales motion, the size of the organization. Given the fact that you guys are so early stage, maybe you could touch on Terminus as well, and then jump into your questions for Stephen and me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I couldn't show up with Steven on and not be wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So it's sad that it's like the only Hawaiian shirt I have. He kind of makes fun of me often that I need to.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
I like it.
Pretty good. Oh, well, I mean, I know both of you pretty well, but background on myself, currently founder and CEO of Sonar Software. We are a sales operations collaboration platform. Find out more about that in all the fun social places. But diving into sort of the topic that I wanted to ask on, we, like you said, Pete, are early stage software company, ramping up our sales and go-to-market team. Happy to report that we are building our sales and marketing team as we speak. So, of course, I've been doing a lot of that on my own for the last couple of years. And as I'm building these new resources, I know Steven's been managing huge sales teams. There's only so much of my time that I can dedicate to each account that we start to bring on, each deal in the pipeline that we start to bring on. So my question is, being effective as now sort of the executive sponsor on a lot of these deals, when do you find yourself at the right time of, inserting executive sponsorship? There's a ton of articles out there that say you need to be in it at the very top, right when you're entering the funnel, you need to jump into the middle, be the champion at the very end that pushes the deal across. So really curious, being mindful of time and being able to spread my time across my sales team, how and when is the best place for me to jump in to active deals in the sales cycle?
Yeah.
How many reps do you guys have right now?
500? No, 2.
Got it. So you have two reps other than you, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, this is funny. Steven and I were literally like whining about this to each other at the before the call. Because, and actually, what's the ASP? What's Sonar's ASP right now? Who's the audience you guys are selling to?
Yeah, audience is selling to RevOps and sales ops teams. Starting ASP is right around $8K a year.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so Bevy, Steven was talking about this. So Steven, you want to talk about how you guys do this at Bevy, because you guys have like 5 sellers or whatever, and there's just one Steven, and obviously there's a lot of Steven to go around, but like still 5 reps is quite a bit to like spread across executive sponsorship across. How do you guys tackle this?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a really good question because it will increasingly creep and become a source of anxiety, whether you're a sales leader or doing founder-led sales. And I think for me, the most important thing to establish early on is like a very clear set of rules of engagement. And it's twofold. First, at Bevy, we have every AE has a top 10 account list and then sort of their next 25. For any top 10 account, add me to whatever calls you're on as optional, and I'm going to try to make them all. For your next 25, add me as optional, probably assume I'm not going to make it. When I say I'm not going to make it, that is predicated on the idea that we are increasingly actively engaged across our top 10 account base. So I have 6 AEs now. That's
add a boy. Sounds like the SDRs are focused in the right direction. Hey, turns out.
So that's one piece. And then the other piece, and sort of you and I have spoke to this a little bit before, but I think it's the idea of like what you really need to matrix out is what those rules of engagement look like, and actually understand, like, based first on who the prospect is, like what is their title, what is their role? Is this chief marketing officer? Is this a field marketer? Their seniority, like, is this a CXO? Is this a VP? Is this a director? Is this just an IC? And the sales stage you're at, like, that's easy information that could be easily ingested, but what you need to have is based on some sort of matrix, like what's the engagement plan? Like, is this a discovery call that we're going to do? Are we workshopping with them? Are we doing a brown bag lunch with the company? And what's the actual purpose? Like, what is the ideal outcome that we're trying to drive? And based on that, let's dictate who on our team is mandatory, who on our team is optional, what their roles are, and what the assets we're actually going to sort of cover are. And I think if you go from like understanding the prospect role their seniority, the stage, the engagement pathway, the purpose, the team, your roles, and the assets. Like, it's actually not all that difficult to quickly mock that up. And what it dictates is I don't have 6 AEs slacking, Steven, do you want to be on this call?
Right. Do you want to, this is the thing that when Brad emailed us earlier, do you want to expand on any of this? I thought that this nice little graphic that you put together here might be helpful, or is this just essentially the delineation of what you just described, Steven?
Yeah, and it is really ugly. I put it together like 6 minutes before this call, but again,
I think it's beautiful.
I think it's great.
It matches your Hawaiian shirt. It's got the purple.
It is purple. For purpose, it's like, what's the fucking point? Pardon my French. You know, and I think that's actually the most important piece. You know, as a sales leader, like one of the best questions is like what do we want the prospect or customer to emerge sort of feeling or taking away from this? Like, how do they literally
what's our exit? I say this to my reps all the time. I'm like, what is our like set your intention before the call? Like, what are we trying to do? Like, what are we trying to exit this call to do? And as a result, that is the goal of this call. So like I love WTFP. When you emailed that earlier, I was like, what does that stand for? Like, okay, now I know.
and what's funny is the reason I struggled to articulate that is I actually use the phrase intention. I think like there is like being mindful of the people you're actually talking to and taking that sort of like mindful based approach to sales. Sounds really ticky tacky and corny, but it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what do you want them to feel and what do you want them to do? So that's what I would put as the purpose. And again, like the assets piece matter, and you can start matrixing this out and pulling in your marketing team. So hopefully that's helpful, Brad. I'll get you set up with some Hawaiian shirts though, for sure.
I love it. Just
I think that the last piece going back to this is, you know, also segment out, is this a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 account, right?
Yeah.
And that's the dimension that's missing here because it changes again.
Yeah. So I think so Brad, your question is one around like resourcing. So I just dropped this slide deck into the chat room for everybody. This is a slide deck that I present a lot of V2 portfolio companies, and it's essentially it's a sales maturity model that kind of goes through a stepwise process. You know, do we know what problem we're solving? Does it work? Will someone pay? Will many people pay? Can non-founders sell this? Can we build a mini sales team? Can we max out a small sales org? So like, you know, Bevy is in this area right here where, you know, they got a bunch of reps, they got a repeatable sales motion. Brad's down here. Can non-founders sell this? And so the thing there is, there's only 40 or 50 hours, and I guess maybe like 50 or 60 or 70 hours if you're like the founder of a company in the week. And so what are you going to spend those hours on? And I think that kind of what you're describing is important, which is like, hey, I need to be parsimonious, or maybe not parsimonious, but like intentional with like what I'm using my time on. And so these are kind of the things that I usually advocate that people spend their time on. And so what you're talking about is like selling, like how much time should I be spending selling? And so I think that the important thing there is like, don't undersell how important it is for you to get your reps to success, right? Because the worst possible thing is to hire some reps and then they shit the bed, right? And you guys, the worst possible thing would not be to have a repeatable sales motion and then hire a bunch of AEs to like kind of figure it out. Now, the good news is I know that you've been selling the hell out of Sonar because I know you guys have a bunch of happy customers in the sales nerd world. So the good news is it is repeatable. So then what we really got to do is we got to make sure we get those reps to success. And so I would challenge you to not underinvest there. Like, and so Steven's in a different situation, right? Like, Steven, how many reps do you guys have? 5, 4, 5, 6?
6 and like two SDRs. And when I started, it was 1 AE. Was 2. My condition of coming was we had to fire one of them. But right.
So, but there's a lot of AE. There's a lot of meetings to spread Steven around. Whereas in your case, Brad, like there's 2 different things. There's a couple of different things going. Like 1, there's only 2 AEs. 2, like it is existentially problematic if your AEs don't get to success. So what I would do is I would bias in that direction to make sure that that like you're riding along as a sales engineer. Now I do this a lot where I'll be on calls with my reps and just do an email in the background, just like as you kind of saw the thing that Stephen, what was my assignment? Right, all the talking, Pete smile, be pretty. That's what I do. I'm just like, hey, what's up? Executive sponsorship, how's it going? And then there as a potential sales engineering backup. Then as you get bigger, I think Steven totally nailed it. Then what you want to do is like, where's my highest points of leverage? And so usually from an executive sponsorship standpoint, so my friend Clara, she is the CEO of Hearsay, and she gave this presentation at the first round capital founder conference, and she's like, yeah, man, I'm like the world's best SDR and the world's best closer, and like she's like, I can get a meeting with anyone and I'll like show up and buy the wine, or like get things across the line. And I think like once you get your reps to the point, and I think Steven is talking about it as well, it's like, yeah, like I'll be an opener and a closer for you on like all your deals, maybe, or maybe a lot of deals. I will be a sales engineer for you only on like the big dogs, right? The super legit ones. But I think that might be a little bit like kind of further down the road from where you're at right now. And so given the fact that you only have two, like what else are you going to be spending your time doing? Like, going and doing like, speaking at survivorship bias conferences, like forget that junk, right? We gotta get your AEs successful. So that's kind of like my take on that. Follow up, Brad, before we move on.
No, you're spot on. And I think what's unique is right now is it's early because these are relatively new reps to our organization. I'm on every one of them because I am acting in that sales engineer capacity, and they're still learning the tech and still grasping onto that and hitting all the value props. My hope is as that continues to grow and their knowledge grows, I peel back a little bit, but still want to be involved in almost every deal to where I can be, but just mostly be supportive of them as well.
So by the way, as a early stage sales leader, one of the most critical points that you need to really hammer home is, hey, I don't care if you founded this company or if you're the head of marketing, or who are all great at Bevy, but it's like, Derek, my boss, like, you're going to talk about the origin story because that's actually what's critically important for people to understand about how this company even exists. I'm telling you, I'm going to narrowly focus myself on why the hell I'm at Bevy in the first place and why I left a ton of equity on the table at Salesforce to come over here. And I think that is really important. It's like you actually really do need to get people pretty scripted, and you should validate and certify your reps on the core messaging, and you should not be running it.
Yeah.
And the last piece is like, this is a sort of Stanley McChrystallism, but it's like, shared consciousness and powered execution is predicated on this idea that you basically, every time someone asks a question, you make it a sort of codified mandate whenever possible. So if you're on a call and you model a behavior and you're like, next time you're doing that, stamp that out in your process immediately, because it's going to be critically important to like start extricating yourself out as much as humanly possible.
Wonderful.
Spot on.
All
Love it.
right, Brad. See you later, man. Thank you for
Awesome.
thank you for coming. All right. Cool. I successfully dismissed him without stopping the Zoom. All right, wonderful. I'm gonna go ahead and add Vishal. Gosh, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've totally butchered it last time. He's been a multi-time sales strategy office hours. We're gonna start needing like a term for these. Like we're gonna like detention. Everyone's in detention. We're out here. What's up, Vishal? Am I pronouncing that right, dude?
100% correctly. Thank you.
Okay, killer. So why don't you just give a quick intro on what SIFT does, ASP, size of sales organization, et cetera, and then we'll jump into your question here, please.
Perfect. So this is Vishal here at SIFT. We're a digital trust and safety platform used by online businesses to stop transaction fraud, account takeovers, spam and scam, all the sort of abuses and ugliness that exists on the internet. Mm-hmm. We have about 15 AEs right now. Average deal size ACV about 40K. And that's me.
Nice. And so what is your, you had a question here about joining a Series B company. Why don't you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so essentially I joined Sift
Mhm.
around the size that Bevy is right now, or
Nice.
if I read Steven's LinkedIn correctly, around the size Bevy was when Steven joined. But I joined as an early stage sort of evangelical rep, part of the classic, Jason Lemkin, hire two reps and let them fight it out to see if it's the process or the reps that's successful. So I
Mhm.
was one of those two.
I,
But one
I,
day,
I think that the more optimum approach there is that the founder figures out how to sell it first versus like allowing two reps to eat each other alive, which sounds wildly inefficient. But like we have improved the state of the art since maybe that truism was bandied around. But anyway,
that is right.
empathy for you having to play Lord of the Flies, got it. But at
Yep.
least you're still here, so I know what the other guy looks like.
So I say to myself, one day I want to be where Steven is, right? The sales manager, first sales leader at a company around the size Sift was, 40, 50 employees.
Yeah.
And as a sales leader now, I find myself, I see so many of the problems that a company can have, all the different inefficiencies. And
Yeah.
I live in my little world
Mhm.
of how to fix them for my team. But when you're at Steven's level and you're joining a company that's obviously had some success prior to your arrival, how do you know what to focus on first so that you're enhancing the process and not bringing, Salesforce or MuleSoft practices because it worked the last time around?
Yeah. This is a phenomenal question because I made every mistake that you should probably look to avoid if you ever do that. So again, basically founder-led sales. Derek, my boss, to his credit, CEO of the company, did a really good job of really establishing great fit with some pretty amazing sort of tentpole customers. So to Pete's point, like that is the right approach. Second piece is he entrusted me to bring to bear whatever sort of best practices I was bringing to bear. Here's the thing: the curse of coming from a highly like orchestrated, well-oiled machine like MuleSoft is you have to live with the anxiety of knowing what good looks like and live with the anxiety of knowing it's going to take a hell of a lot of time to get there. Here's the two approaches, and I'll tell you what I took and why I might reapproach this differently. My whole goal was let's bring on board some reps who I know can thrive in a really autonomous, ambiguous environment, drive an evangelical sale, figure out what great looks like, and then let's codify that. In retrospect, I would never do that again. I would fully codify the wrong process instead of trying to collect the data to figure out what the right process was. And as long as that wrong process was repeatable, it could be optimized.
Sure.
I think the second mistake I made was I totally under-rotated on pushing to bring on board our head of sales ops and effectiveness. Had I brought her on board 6 months sooner, I think we would have been, probably 7 to 10xing revenue that first year instead of doing like half of that. So for me, the first thing I'd say is I'd never wish Series A sales on anyone. I don't know like why you'd want to do that more than once. The whole point of being a Series A sales leader is that you could go do it at a more mature organization. Maybe that's a jaded perspective, but again, I actually think focus on documenting and codifying a process first. That's repeatable. By the way, single most important lever you have is you stamp out what the process is in Salesforce. It sounds super counterintuitive, but like literally just like what are the ops like stages? What are the verifiable actions at each stage? Like what data do we need to make sure we collect as sort of the minimum viable, qualification criteria or threshold to advance at each stage? Doesn't matter what the stages are. Doesn't matter if those are right or wrong, but like that is your discovery guide, right? Like it's something that you could literally print out. Like here's the litmus test. Can you print out your sales play and someone can read it and at least like fudge their way through following it? I would have done that first. I waited way too long.
Yeah. One thing I would note, so I kind of sound like a broken record on this, but when early on, and this is related to what Brad's question early on in an organization's life, you only have a certain amount of resources, you don't have a certain amount of time. And so you really have to look at the organization kind of like a product manager and say, hey, like how many, we got these bugs, we have features that I'd like to add to our sales organization, et cetera. But you can't do it all. And so you have to think about what are the things that I have to do first. And I think that Steven's point is really well taken there, which is like when you're joining an organization, like we made this error at Atrium where I had a sales manager who joined to help me out. And like I had been repeatedly selling. So I'd sold, a few dozen deals myself and had a successful sales motion. And so, transferring that to somebody else's brain so they can do it is hard enough. Transferring that to somebody else's brain while they're trying to maybe like reinvent the wheel or what have you, like how are you going to be able to like scientifically methodologically like isolate variables? Like, okay, cool, this was working, but now we're changing a bunch of things. So is it because of level of effort, et cetera, et cetera? So I think like, constrain down the number of things that you think that you're, trying to address is a really helpful thing there. Also, the thing that is important is to understand like what is the actual stage of the organization, because I talk with a lot of reps about this all the time. They're like, oh, Series B or oh, Series A or whatever. It doesn't mean anything. It's just like a letter, right? Or like, it has nothing to do with the maturity of the organization. Like the founder may have like, compromise, nudie pics of like some DC or something. It was like able to get them to, give them $25 million. Oh, I raised $25 million. Doesn't mean that there's a repeatable sales motion. We might have one customer that's paying like 800K of ARR. Whoa, cool. All of your sales are going to be like that. Well, it turns out that his uncle happens to run that company. Like, and so what you really got to do is understand what the level of maturity is of the sale. So actually, I'm going to grab a link here, but like just you can't necessarily assume like what the health of the organization's sales motion is. Here, I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the chat here. So like sales maturity questionnaire.
One other piece that I also totally under-indexed on and wish I had over-indexed on is instrumentation and measurement of the process early. Because I was of the mind that like, oh, we're going to get all this dirty data. I'm going to like wait to try to measure all of these variables. But to Pete's point, like you don't know what isn't working unless you're measuring it. So I think what Pete's saying is spot on. Understand the maturity of the organization, but also just optimize like a play. Stop trying to like get to the perfect play before you stamp it out. I think it's that like I just would invert that one thing and it would have made a massive meaningful difference.
Or in the case of in Vishal's case when he joined Sift, he didn't say this, but I'm inferring it because like I know how most startups work. Or if you show up and there is no play,
yes. Yeah.
Like first we got to know where we're at. Oh, there's no play here. There's no repeatability. You sold this to a bunch of your like, your startup accelerator batch mates, and now they're not utilizing it all. Cool. So it sounds like we actually have to figure out a repeatable sales motion here. So I think it's, like where are you at, and then what are the most important things to work on next. Wonderful, Vishal. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
yeah,
Vishal.
see you, man. Let me go ahead and Chaitan's role to attendee. Delightful. All right, cool. So next we're gonna have Daniel join us here. Let me see if I did that correctly.
All right. Can you hear me?
Hey, there he is. Hey, Daniel.
All right.
Yeah. Oh,
good afternoon.
I'm loving your. I'm loving
on the Hawaiian shirts, or I would have dressed differently, but
oh well.
Here we are.
Yeah. Well, you brought your guitar, so that's good. So
yeah.
Daniel, why don't you give us really quick where you work, the size of the sales organization, kind of the parameters of the sales motion, then we can get into your question. Okay.
Sure. So I actually joined a startup about 13 years ago called High Radius, and joined a founder and was the first sales guy. And I've been through a roller coaster. We're now a fairly large group. I think we have around 60 or 70 sales reps and a bunch of support people, maybe bigger now. So what's happening right now is I've been an individual contributor for a lot of that, moved around and done a lot of different stuff. But I'm taking my first jump into sales management, and I'm actually leading kind of a startup within our company around, the company does accounts receivable software for large organizations, and we're branching into treasury solutions. And so this is new product, new kind of customer set we're dealing with, lots of new stuff. And so my question is really, how do you kind of make the transition from AE to management? And is there any advice on kind of leveling up quickly? Because I'm very quickly seeing this as a whole different ballgame, and want to make sure I'm focused in the right areas to get the team off the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you. Steven, you did this at MuleSoft, I want to say, right?
I've seen a lot of people try and fail. So what's interesting is my whole perspective, and I over-index on this a lot. The thing I tell every SDR or early stage salesperson is stick in that organization long enough to get promoted to management, because actually it's a hell of a lot harder going from SDR to AE to leader than it is to going from SDR to SDR leader to sales leader.
Interesting.
And I'm like very staunchly firm on that. So here's what I'll say I've seen doesn't work. I think the big mistakes that early like first time sales leaders make, the number one mistake is over indexing on giving the answer versus facilitating a process of discovery. I hate that. It sounds super trite and trivial. I still do it right now, because as I'm waiting to like build a second line leadership team underneath me, the times I have to zoom in and be like a deal coach, you get time constrained, you get stressed out, and you start grabbing the wheel and just giving the answer. So I think like the single biggest pitfall is you have so much domain experience that you are going to be highly tempted to predicate your own credibility on the fact that that's the case. And that is why they probably promoted you, but they also probably wouldn't have promoted you unless you had the aptitude to lead. So actually you almost need to dispel with the idea that your team needs your experience. What they need is you to sort of guide them along that learning process. The second piece is early on establishing your operating rhythm and cadence is going to be really important, because otherwise you're going to act like an AE, which is you're going to like over index to like resourcing late stage pipeline that's closing, and you're going to under index on like pipeline creation and acceleration.
What's coming in this month? What's coming in?
Exactly.
Coming in this month.
And that's a great way to have a big Q4 and a terrible Q1. And trust me, I've done it. Like, so I don't know, Pete, what's your perspective here?
Yeah, I think those are great. I think when I went from being a seller to a manager, and I think probably the most common failure mode that you see is that you get a promotion of somebody who's a good individual contributor, and they think that being a manager is being essentially a super IC. And you see this a lot where, they're on, it's kind of like the Brad question earlier, they're on a bunch of calls. They're controlling a lot of calls. They're filling their days with doing the work, or like, doing the work versus working on the business, like, doing the work versus working on, or working in the business versus working on the business. And so what you as a manager want to do is get more into the working on the business versus like in the business, being a little cog, like, and it's a transition. So I just dropped a couple of resources into the chat room there. One is the chapter on early stage sales management from the book I wrote on startup sales called Founding Sales. The second is a link to some books on this. So probably like one of the best probably the best modern sales management book out there is Cracking the Sales Management Code by Jason Jordan. It's very much focused on rigor and managing by metric and what have you. The chapter I dropped in there on early stage sales management from Founding Sales is more like holistic on, these are all the different things that you have to be spending your time on. as a manager. But I think probably like the watchword is like, you're not a rep anymore. Yeah. You're a teacher, and you're a coach, and you're a therapist, and you're a timekeeper, and you're responsible for making meetings run on time, and you're responsible for making people show up to meetings, and you're responsible for, documenting, kind of to Steven's point, don't give the answer, facilitate a process of discovery, or like facilitate a process of discovery when we converge on what the answer is. Now it's time to document that, and then make sure that documentation is accessible to everybody. So it's like a bunch of coaching and secretarial and like administrative work, which is like way less glamorous than, being the super rep who's going to swing in and save the deal.
Totally.
So I think those would be things to look at.
I just I was writing this down top of mind when I think about like what my actual job is. Like my number one job is really to like hire and develop the best people possible. That's not something you do at all as an individual contributor. That's why, again, I go back to like, why are SDR leaders? Why should they be an SDR leader before they're an AE? Like, it's neither here nor there, but that's like the number one skill that's incredibly challenging, because as an IC, you'll probably try to replicate yourself on your team, and you won't necessarily even know why you've been successful. So being systematic about hiring and get a process around that. Like if you don't hire ahead of your plan, you're going to miss your plan. Just a heads up. Second,
the pipe above the pipe.
Yes. The second piece is your job is to de-risk pipeline. The reason I love Atrium so much is I live in the opportunity health like dashboard. The reality is understanding like, why is pipeline that is healthy, and how do I replicate that? But importantly, like for stuff that isn't moving along, like why is there no next meeting? What is the sort of like, are these prospects coming inbound back to us? Like, are they responding to our emails? When's the last time we actually talked? Like de-risking pipeline is a lot more of a slog and a lot less exciting than hopping on sales calls and coaching people. But it's equally critically important. And frankly, like I would over-index on the former versus the latter, because if you built a repeatable process, and to Pete's point, you're documenting it as you go, the truth is like you will need to be on a lot less of these calls. And to our point earlier, hopefully you have an executive engagement plan anyhow that dictates when you are on.
Yeah. That would be, so like pipeline review sucks. It's miserable. It's like, and so, but guess what? Doing it is kind of important. And so have like operational rhythm. Like, do you have your Monday morning sales team meeting? Are you doing stand-ups? We used to not do stand-ups. I had stand-ups at TalentBin, and then we got away from doing them. And like ever since now, like work from home, thanks to our friend Corona Ramadama Ding Donga. Now we do stand-ups every morning. It's phenomenal, right? It keeps up the operational rhythm, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, Wednesday afternoon, pipeline reviewing time. Yep, it's that time again. Got to do our push-ups. It's super annoying. Oh, but so what we used to do before we all work from home is I would buy pizza for the team. So, at least if you're going to go to the vet, you might as well get some like dog treats, et cetera. Right. So I think like all those are the things that you're going to get into that's being a manager. It's like being a mom, being a dad, being a coach, being a janitor, et cetera. And like not being the person who's like swinging into action, because that's low leverage. I would recommend you read the chapter on sales management from Founding Sales, because it talks about like what is the role of a modern sales manager, and that'll kind of give you some starting points. Sound good, Dan?
Fantastic, man. Thank you both so much. That was great. Lots of good stuff in there. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Later. Time for one more question here. So let's see if Barry's still here. He had one that was interesting. Barry is joining the webinar as a panelist. Let's see if he shows up. And if he doesn't, I can ask it.
Oh, what a name.
I know, right?
Dude,
like
so legit.
Hey, so I am here. Yeah.
Barry, what's shaking, man? How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks. Been a long time MSP guy.
Oh,
happy to join this conversation.
Yeah, phenomenal. So you had a question. So just introduce yourself really quickly. Sales motion. I think you do consulting. So maybe it's like prior sales motion. Oh yeah, it used to be at LexisNexis and Gartner.
Yeah, I'd been a sales productivity consultant at the Alexander Group 20 years ago, and from that point on.
Oh wow.
I've been a sales ops and strategy guy, and I've worked in healthcare and in technology, and most recently in information services.
Were you at did you and Jeremy Donovan overlap at Gartner
Yeah,
at all?
yeah. So,
Oh,
so I'm a big sales law fan too. You know, he's well published.
yeah.
So yeah, I worked with Jeremy at Gartner.
Oh, phenomenal. He's gonna be on sales strategy office hours next week.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely be there for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, somebody who's like worked at the Alexander Group, and then yeah, okay, cool. You were definitely one of us, the sales nerds.
Well, yeah, well, you know, that's the thing. You know, that's why I really I just found out about this a couple of weeks ago, and I've really enjoyed your discussions, because I mean, you know, I understand the topics. So my question is,
yeah, you had a question on enterprise sales and
yeah,
BDRs?
the motion in enterprise sales. When I was at, you know, in my understanding had always been that you've got these roles and responsibilities, and you were talking about how you really codify those. And for me, you know, the strategic account exec in those multi-million-dollar accounts, you know, had a role. They were the quarterback, and they managed everything, and it was a pretty discrete thing. And you'd have specialists who knew how to manage, you know, those big relationships. And,
Right.
and now I've been seeing some clients have been asking me, well, you know, should we throw a BD on this? You know, and it's something that I've been hearing a lot more of lately. Some of the clients I've been working with have been experimenting with it. I have
When
a
you
feeling,
when you say BD, you mean like a BDR, like an opener?
well, yeah, a specific you know, hunter role, because you know, it was my understanding that the strategic account executive, you know, was that unique hybrid who could do both relationship management and developing new business. And
I love this question.
and what they're finding is, you know, they're looking for new avenues of growth, and they want to throw new resources into that account. And my feeling is, and I don't want to jaundice my feeling. I want to hear what your feelings are, because, you know, there's some pluses and minuses with the approach, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
I'll tell you that in the Americas, I'm probably gonna get a cease and desist from Salesforce again, or whatever, an angry legal letter. But early on in MuleSoft, let's say pre-acquisition, the SDR team was driving 50 to 65% of all total pipeline, including current customers. So what was really interesting about that, and the number one thing I advocate to any SDR leader, is we actually incentivized SDRs to do more than just set meetings, and to do more than just set meetings in net new opportunities. And frankly, we actually drew up an incentive structure. I should write the damn blog post someday on it. But essentially, it was a point system, right? So you had 10 points, and you got 2 points as an SDR for setting a meeting. You got 5 points if it converted to stage 1. You got an additional point if it advanced beyond stage 3. You got an additional point if you brought power to bear. You got an additional point if it closed. What it actually ended up doing was laying the foundation for a corporate sales role that I built out as a bridge. That corporate sales role got quashed because we actually took it from Salesforce, and Salesforce got rid of corporate sales in America.
Right.
We turned it into a full cycle role. What I have found is, first of all, you have to increase the total tenure of an SDR, and you have to set clear benchmarks on how they do this. But if you basically equip them with a way to incentivize them to do this, they absolutely can not just source the early stage opportunities, but actually advance them. The one other nuance that I'll say is, our overall best SDR in the entire company was the #1 strategic AE. So both need to be amazing at it. And that's where modern sales is going to be all of these kids who actually grew up doing SDR shit, managing global accounts. Pardon my friend.
I think so, Barry. The place where I've run into this challenge is unsurprisingly a similar place where Steven ran into this challenge. So my last software company, TalentBin, was acquired by Monster. You really only have these problems when you have like tenured sales organizations where you have like very large accounts that have a lot of spend, et cetera. And so I think really the challenge that we had, and there's kind of like a special subgenre here where like a new product, I mean, not dissimilar to MuleSoft, right? New product trying to be sold into an existing customer base, et cetera. And so the challenge that we had there was you had these reps who like owned their accounts, and same sort of model as the strategic accounts, like, oh, this is my account, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem is that like, if you want to have growth, you either have to set proper expectations from a quota standpoint, right, an output, or from a, an input standpoint, like, do we have SLAs around how we're engaging these accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And so that first piece right there kind of relies on instrumentation. And so I think a lot of times you have high correlation in these large legacy sales organizations to like lower instrumentation. They just like, yeah, the comp will figure itself out. So either you got to raise quotas on those people so they actually have a desire to find growth within those accounts. And moreover, you got to have sales ops do the heavy lifting of saying, actually, how much opportunity is there in this account versus being like, yeah, your book of business should grow by 30%. If that person's sitting on an account that should triple within the next year because there's so much like pie left to eat within there, well, like we need to model that and then put that into their comp plan, into their quota, or we need to split the territory and say like, look, man, you can't sit on these. We had a topic on this a couple of weeks ago in sales strategy office hours. Where it's like, look, you can't sit on all these accounts that have a ton of opportunity in there and not work it.
Yep.
Right. Because we need you to work on it. And so one way you can do this either like KPI it properly for that strategic rep, or say, you know what, that's fine. You know what, you quarterback, but we're going to allow a hunter to go in here and then we're going to resolve the squabbles in between by like allowing you to get rips on the work that he or she does,
right,
or whatever. But like someone's got to do the work in here, because we're not just going to sit here, because if we don't do the work on those accounts, you know who is? A competitor is going to come in
right,
and eat that.
When I had 70 SDRs on my team, I think 35 of them were mapped to key account or strategic AEs. The other piece I think that Pete hits right on the head is you have to do the heavy lifting on the instrumentation piece. And when I go back to that comp plan piece, the interesting thing about, I gave you a way you could spread 10 points out. If your challenge as a company is that you have stagnant pipeline that's not advancing from early stage to mid stage, shocking, it happens, I know, over index on the point scores or the weighting for that SDR, and all of a sudden they're going to get on your key account AE's asses to move this stuff along. And they're actually going to go and get multi-threaded. They're going to pull power and they're going to do the things that actually are within their control.
That's a really good point.
And they can maintain that relationship with the AE, and the prospect that isn't sort of soiled. And you can always be like, oh yeah, my SDR is just getting a little aggressive.
Hey, Steven, if it's okay with you, I saw this person on LinkedIn over here. I'm going to go ahead and loop them in. And Steven's like, puts down his umbrella drink, at the golf course or whatever. This is strategic AE. And it's like, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? Okay, cool, boss. Yeah. Right. And like that, everybody wins in that sort of scenario. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'd say is constraining and shrinking the focus of SDRs is the worst way to build like a talent pipeline. And the corporate sales model, the reason I was so strongly advocating for it, by the way, the one person who went through the corporate sales program at MuleSoft, which literally ended the day we got acquired, he was the #1 rep in 2019 in all of mid-market and enterprise. So it works.
Yeah. This is great, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. See you later, man. Cool. We're done. In fact, we're 6 over. Surprised the people have stuck with us. But wonderful. Well, Steven, good job. Well done. Very, very impressive. So for everybody who's still here listening to us blather on, we're going to go ahead and record this. Or sorry, it is recorded. Hey, I'm going to upload it to YouTube. I'm going to distribute it out to everybody and all the people who have been here before. For folks who haven't joined, who are not familiar with Modern Sales yet, go to modernsaleshq.com, check it out. If you have a field sales organization or want to understand how community could be a driver of growth within your organization, how to do community marketing correctly, you should definitely, and maybe learn about Hawaiian shirts, you should definitely check out Bevy, because they run the world's largest community of community managers. Meta, very inception,
which is I don't say that lightly.
Yeah, very inception-y. So like they're super experts at that. So if you're thinking about how community could help you, you guys should definitely check that out. And then next week we're gonna have Jeremy Donovan on, who we were just talking about earlier. He's absolutely fantastic. A sales strategy and sales operations professor. So that's gonna be really exciting. So hopefully we'll see you all then. But otherwise, take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Stephen.
Bye.